Clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show. 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 Clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show.
And welcome to the Nomiki Show. It's Friday, April 29th, Femme Friday. Fun Friday. Brief little public service announcement. We are going to be taking next week off because we're human beings who need to take time off. But we're going to have other stuff up there, best ofs. I know you guys love it. I didn't realize, well, first off, we've been doing this for a long time, so I don't imagine everybody's seen, maybe you've joined our audience, our community a little bit later, and you've missed some of our early big episodes, or you forgot, or throwbacks. It's nice to see what we predicted and what happened in some cases. So we're going to be putting a bunch of other stuff out there next week. But in the meantime, same time, same place, Wednesdays and Friday show on Twitch and YouTube. And then, of course, join us on all the other podcast platforms. We are on every podcast platform now. We have an amazing show today. Very excited. We're going to be talking to our dear friend and friend of the show, the one and only Kim Kelly, who has a book out called Fight Like Hell, The Untold History of American Labor. It has been highly anticipated. She's been talking about it when she comes on the show. I believe it went on sale 3 days ago. This is so exciting. So we get to talk about the great work of the labor movement and how it's grown really since, a revival since the 60s. And Kim, she has been an independent labor journalist. She writes a column for Teen Vogue. She's going to tell us about that transformation and what you're going to learn from this incredible book. And then later, we're going to talk about the right wing's attack on the trans community. Obviously, unless you've been, asleep or something, which I can't imagine you are, you have been hearing what the cultural wars that they've been putting on. Erin Reed is going to be joining us. Erin tracks anti-trans legislation all over the country and runs the largest trans healthcare map, an informed consent map listing every informed consent hormone therapy clinic for trans people. She's also publishes on TikTok at Erin the More, and we'll go speak to her later in the show.
The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show.
Guys, I know some of you are related to CBD. I know some of you have heard me talk about CBD, but I had a little bit of a week last week, and I got to tell you, the only thing that helped me get through it was my Sunset Lake CBD. I say this because I was traveling and I got sick, and then I wasn't sleeping because I was sick, and then they had me on like antibiotics, et cetera, et cetera. It's just the modern day world that we live in. And I try not to take, a lot of medicine at all, but CBD does help me, especially if I'm traveling, if I'm stressed. I think I read an article yesterday saying that like millennials are the most anxiety-ridden generation. I don't know if it's because they measure it now, or I believe it. Like, we're sitting in front of our computers all day, and it's, and the news cycle is horrible. But CBD has definitely helped me with anxiety. It's helped me with sleep issues and aches and pains. But really, it's only Sunset Lake CBD that's been able to do this, or CBD as they say now. Sunset Lake CBD is a farmer-owned company that ships craft CBD products directly from their farm in Vermont, a former Ben & Jerry's farm in rural Vermont. They ship it to your door, wherever you are in this country. They have all types of different products. Really, they do. You got to check out. They're expanding so fast, and the quality is incredible. They have tinctures. They have premium hemp. They have salves. They have lotion. They have gummies and fudge and dog treats that you can eat too if you want to. My go-to is the tincture before I go to bed with the melatonin, because it helps you go to sleep and then stay asleep. The CBD helps me stay asleep. I always wake up in the middle of the night. That's my issue. But it also helps with aches and pains. So if you have like muscle pains at night or anything like that, it also helps soothe that pain. They're a great company. Not only do they have incredible products, and I think there's something about the juju, the energy of the people really cultivating this company and the products and the farm, the love that they put into it. But they also pay their workers a minimum wage of $15 an hour, and the employees own the majority of the company. And on top of all that, they support shows like ours and The Majority Report and The David Pakman Show, which is sunsetlakecbd.com right now. And you type in Nomi, Nomi, you will get 20% off of your order. I urge you to do it. I found out that my family members were doing that. Some of them were. But I found out a few others who don't have my last name were not. And they're like, oh, it's okay. We want to support them. I'm like, yeah, but I want folks to know that we're driving them over to sunsetlakecbd.com. So type Nomi, Nomi, and you'll get 20% off of your order. And they always have incredible deals. Sign up for their mailing list because I constantly see new things coming in. sunsetlakecbd.com.
Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show.
Welcome back to TNS. Oh my gosh. Okay. I'm just going to read you a little bit from this. In Fight Like Hell, Kim Kelly throws wide the doors to inspire all of us to seize power for ourselves by showing how, yesterday and today, the oppressed and overlooked, the outcasts and the misfits shaped history. That is the one and only international president of the Association of Flight Attendants, Sarah Nelson, giving an incredible quote for Kim Kelly's new book called Fight Like Hell, The Untold History of American Labor. I am so excited. I've been waiting to have this conversation. Kim Kelly is also, she's a labor reporter. You may know her from Teen Vogue. And is that a book or a poster of your book in the background, Kim?
It's a real book. They let me do a real book.
It went on sale, what, 3 days ago?
Yeah, today. Yeah, the 26th. It came out. They let me get away with it. Can you believe it? I can't.
How do you feel?
It's wild. Like, I'm really happy and I really hope people like it. And I am really worn out from doing all this press tour stuff, but I'm excited to talk to you because I'm like, oh my God, finally one of my friends.
Oh. Well, we love you. And hopefully everybody has been kind. Although it would be funny. I would love to see you go on a conservative show and talk about this. And yeah.
I know there's a lot of conversations around should we try and take advantage of these massive platforms that people have, like these evil demons like Tucker Carlson. I know Christian Small's got a lot of flack for going into the show. And it's definitely an interesting decision as a way to reach a lot of people. I don't think I would do well because Tucker Carlson's already yelled about me on the show before. We don't need to
I remember that.
hear these things, right?
I think it depends on the situation. I mean, you can go on a CNBC or something like that with all the business reporters and, Anil Cavuto on Fox Business. But Tucker's got a demonic motive. I mean, there are some people you can sway from Fox News that are not, Trumpian white supremacists, believe it or not. It's the only news in town. With that being said, it's something that requires a lot of practice and skill. And I'm not saying that you don't have it. You definitely do. It's just
I don't have the media training for that.
Not everybody should, by the way. I always say something not everybody should be that person. There are folks who need to do deep work, and you've done incredible research here. I don't even know where to begin because there's so much to talk about. I'm like, can we do a Joe Rogan podcast and do 3 hours of this? Not Joe Rogan, our version. Okay.
There's one in there, and I remember most of it at this point.
So this is okay, this is so well needed, right? I mean, the labor movement is having a revival. There's a lot of energy. When did you start writing this book?
I started it, let's see, I think really like March or April 2020 is when I sat down. I was like, oh, I gotta write this thing now. And I started trying to write it as I would, and this is true of the entire time I was writing the damn thing. I was going back and forth from Philly, where I live, to Alabama, where I was covering first an effort by Amazon workers in Bessemer to organize and to try and unionize there. And then I got sucked into this coal miner strike down the road in Brookwood. And I think I lost track of the amount of time I've been back and forth. So I was like doing all this research and sitting in my little office, like being a little gremlin, typing this book up for half the time. And the rest of the time I was going down to Alabama into this very current and alive labor conflict. It was definitely an interesting experience.
And at that time, did you feel like there was something different than, a traditional strike that may not be getting attention the way now a lot of strikes are?
Oh, and with the folks in Alabama?
Yeah.
I mean, they're still on strike. They're out here year two. They eclipsed Pittston. I mean, there's a lot of factors in that strike that have really drawn my interest. And of course, I've become so close with some of the people involved that if I'm kind of personal, I'm like, oh, they're my friends. Like now I need to make sure that people know what my friends are up to and that they get a good contract. But I think something about that strike that has always stuck out to me is the fact that it hasn't gotten as much attention as so many other strikes because of who the workers are and because of assumptions about who they are and assumptions around what they believe or who they voted for or, what they're actually fighting for. And it just goes to show that there's a lot of ignorance around what's happening in more rural areas, maybe in the deep South or in the Midwest or in the Northeast, or not the Northeast, the Northwest. Like there were so many incredibly important and interesting labor struggles happening around the country all the time, like not just New York, not just LA, though they're also important. Like it just kind of solidified this idea for me that like, oh wow, there's literally stuff happening everywhere all the time. There just aren't enough labor reporters, not enough labor friendly publications there to cover them all. So at least I can stick with this one.
But I mean, but you say New York and LA, I mean, those are media towns. So even though the Buffalo Starbucks workers were not in New York City, it's fascinating because it may have in a weird way boosted this existing work that you've been working on independently. Now there are more labor reporters or more, at least there's more labor interest.
It's been wild over the past, I guess 2 years since I sat down to do this, and I'm talking to you here today. Like it's kind of driven me a little crazy, like as a reporter, because I'm like, well, I can't go and cover the Kellogg strike, the John Deere strike. Like Striketober is passing me by because I have to finish this chapter. But it was so gratifying and so just wonderful to see how many people are covering these stories now. I've gotten interested in these stories, whether it's brand new labor reporters or other reporters who have become interested in the beat. Like it seems like there's so many more of us now. And it's such a wonderful thing to see because they're never going to be enough to tell every story that needs to be told. But we're in a hell of a better place than even when I started 5 or 6 years ago.
That's incredible. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about, I don't know where we begin. Let's say what has happened since the early 60s and how labor has evolved, whether, actually in terms of actual organized labor, maybe as the politics of the country has changed. I think folks are very familiar with Reagan and how the Democratic Party has disassociated itself with labor in many ways in the last, 40 years. But how does that, let's juxtapose the movement, the actual labor organizing with the politics of the time. And I'll just leave it to you. We'll just kind of build, because there is a lot in this book and I don't even know where to at this point to begin.
I mean, the 60s and 70s were such an incredibly important and such a vibrant and vital time for organizing, especially in spaces where there were more marginalized workers who were trying to make things happen. One of my favorite chapters, The Prisoners, goes into the legacy and past and present of incarcerated workers organizing. In the 70s, there was this explosion of prisoners organizing unions within prisons. And in some cases, they were able to work with organized labor outside the walls. And they're kind of gaining some ground. There are chapters of various prisoners' labor unions across the country. And the Supreme Court came in and was like, oh, no. You can't be doing all that. There are a bunch of legal things that happened before that, right? But essentially, in 1977, the Supreme Court ruled Jones versus North Carolina Prisoners Labor Union basically ruled that people in prison who are working don't have the right to join or organize a union. Like every other worker, well, not every other worker in this country, right? But like so many other workers in this country, they are denied that, even though they go to work and they have a boss and sometimes make a tiny bit of money. They can't clock out, and they're not, they lost that right. But the workers kept organizing anyway. And I guess that's just one example of how the state has gotten in the way of workers trying to organize. And there's the book is like kind of sort of chronological, but not in like in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s.
Right.
I kind of pick out different pieces and try to show how different struggles intersected. So I mean, if there's anything specific that jumps out to you that's interesting, or any specific like political fail that jumps out to you too, like I'm down to get into it.
I mean, this is okay. So let's. Oh God.
Put you on the spot.
I know the problem is we don't have 2 hours. And no, it's fine.
No,
I marked
right?
it up, but I'm just like, I really should have had questions. Like, I never do this because it's usually just a rolling conversation, but there really is a lot. Okay, so
no, it's way more fun this way because there's a lot of folks that I've talked to have had like very specific questions about like specific dates or specific strikes, and I'm like, thank you for asking that. Let me check real quick, because like I said, there's so much stuff in here, and I wrote it like a year ago, and so much has happened. Like a lot of interviews, folks have asked me about the Amazon labor union, which has been really fun to learn more about. But like there are a lot of reporters like Lauren Gurley and Louis Leon, Maximilian Alvarez, like people who have been following that really closely. So I'm always like, just go read what they had to say, and I'll give you my like nerdy, historically based take after.
Because it's in the moment. So I'll start with the beginning, because this is what my personal I think this is lost in the conversation. I'm really glad that you led with women, just how important women have been to labor and still are, by the way, which is why I think this is great.
We're out here.
You've dedicated a few chapters to this, quite a few. I love it. I think people know about the garment workers in New York City.
I would hope.
Well, I should say. I think people.
That's one of the big ones, right? Like a lot of people, like I feel like the big ones that people know about are maybe the Triangle Factory fire. Yeah. Maybe people know Cesar Chavez. Maybe they know like something about auto workers, but that's kind of the broad strokes that most people who aren't invested in this stuff or aren't actively studying it know. So I was like, well, let me pull out all these other interesting things and slap them in there. And hopefully we can get, just not raise awareness, but just teach people about our history. Because so much, it hasn't been lost. Like a lot of brilliant historians and academics and researchers have preserved it and have done really incredible work, digging into that. But it's not that easily accessible. Like there aren't that many radical labor histories sitting around Barnes and Noble.
Right.
Well, there's one now. But
for now.
Yeah, for now. Hopefully there'll be a whole lot more, because this is kind of just the beginning. I hope people pick this up and dig into the bibliography, which is like this thick, and find new threads to pull and new books and authors to explore. Because this is like, I could only fit so much. I fit a lot, but I think we had about like 40,000 words cut, because I showed up with this draft. My editor was like, that's like 3 extra trees worth. Like we can't be doing all that.
Oh my God. It's so funny you say that about Barnes & Noble. I was in Europe. Was this last year? I can't even tell because this pandemic is like confusing. But I was in Europe, and I love going to bookstores in Europe because they're just so much better. They're like, there's a stark difference. You can find books on labor and much stuff that's really hard to find in the US, because even if you go on, and I hate to say Amazon, there's a reason you can't find it on Amazon, because it's not, complimentary.
Topic like I think of like one of my favorite bookstores, Houseman's in London. They have like a whole labor section. And it's like in the front. It's like right there. It's like, oh yeah, of course people should have access to this history. It should be easy to find. It's like,
exactly.
But I guess it's like this is my like conspiracy brain, right? Where it's like, well,
it's true.
The people in power don't want us to know about how powerful we are, because then they're gonna
listen. No, that's exactly it. I was in Scotland. I came back and I went to Barnes & Noble for something and killing time. And what I see that was like the suggested picks versus what I saw in Scotland was like Andrew Cuomo's pandemic book. And I'm like, and just like how to get rich and like all the bullshit American. Yeah. If you really want to understand,
there's a business section or a self-help section, but there's not like a labor history section or a people's history section. Like business, business isn't, who wants to know about business? That's boring.
And the people who are making money off of it, they're in their own little circle, and they all went to like the same business schools.
Yeah, they're not shopping at Barnes and Noble.
They're not traveling to Barnes and Noble. I do want to talk about the New Deal and labor. And
my girl Frances.
Yes. So I think there's a lot of folks who, the New Deal is critically important, but there's a lot of criticisms also of the New Deal, leaving out many people of color in many capacities. But there's an overlap with labor, I guess. I don't want to give it all away, but how do you feel the New Deal and labor dealt with women, people of color, marginalized communities, given the criticism, like the big picture criticisms of the New Deal?
So, I'm not a New Deal scholar, so I'm sure you know more about than I do. But in terms of what I cover, they're doing my best out here, right? But in terms of the New Deal and the way that I kind of cover and approach it in the book, I kind of approach it through the lens of Frances Perkins, who was just this incredible. I actually, speaking of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, I'm in New York right now, and we walked by the plaque that they have on the Brown Building, like where the tragedy happened. And of course, there's construction. I couldn't get close to it. Yeah, like people should be able to check that out. But that was just kind of nice. I was like, oh, I know you. You remember? But Frances Perkins was this woman who I think she's probably about my age when this happened. She happened to be in New York visiting a friend when the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire happened, and she witnessed it. She could, hear the screams and smell the burning flesh. Like, it had an indelible impact on her. And she was already involved in, she worked for like the Consumer Protection League, something like that, like trying to help out consumers. And she was already interested in social justice and workers' issues. But that kind of changed the trajectory of her whole life. And she became involved in local politics and like different regulatory committees and agencies trying to help with workplace safety and fire safety specifically. And, she did a whole bunch of stuff, but the big thing that she did, she ended up being appointed to the cabinet as the first female cabinet member in general, and definitely the first Secretary of Labor. And she was a huge, she was one of the architects of the New Deal. Like, a lot of that came from her. Like, she's the one who came up with Social Security. And she was also just involved in all of the worker centric parts of it. Like, that was her whole thing. And I think she's just an incredibly fascinating person to read more about. But something that happened during that era was we got some of these labor laws. We got some things that were helpful in a way, but like you said, still left people out. Like, we're still dealing with the after effects of that. Like, talk about the National Labor Relations Act, 1935. That was a big deal. That has made it much easier for workers to collectively organize and bargain, but not everybody. It left out several specific categories of workers. One, independent contractors, which is just like, that's a mess.
And how much, just for folks, like independent contractors, then was it as large of did we see in the same way as we do now?
I don't really know. Like, I don't know as much about the history of that specific classification. I'd love to learn more about it because, like, it sucks being one, and I would love to know how we got into this mess, right? But two of the other groups that were left out explicitly and on purpose, domestic workers and agricultural workers. And at that time, those workers were generally Black women and Black men. And they were cut out because Southern lawmakers who were racist did not want those workers to have those rights, to be able to organize, to be able to build power. So the only way that they could pass that bill was to cut out these more vulnerable workers. And we're still seeing the after effects of that now. And it's kind of like, history rhyming, right? Like, the only way we can pass some very useful legislation is to leave a bunch of people out. Right. Wild how we, it seems like they still love doing that.
Shocker. You do touch on the racism that occurred during the time. We don't have a ton of time. There's just so much going on. There's a lot in this book. It's really phenomenal. Okay, so the Pullman Railway porters. I can't say it's tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, A. Philip Randolph helped form the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, which was I think it's the first Black-led, predominantly Black labor union that was recognized as part of. I'm not sure when they incorporated with the AFL, but yeah, they're a big deal. We'll just say that they're a big deal. You can read more about it in the book, but they were representing Pullman porters who worked on the Pullman Company's fancy sleeper cars. And all of those workers were Black men. And that was intentional because that's I'll get into it more in the book. I don't want to give too much away. Shout out to Joseph Pullman. What a dick. There was basically, yeah, it was like the most, yeah, these workers really needed a voice in the job. They really needed some help dealing with like the low wages and the outright racism and just all of the garbage that came with working in that environment, serving predominantly white moneyed passengers. And that union was like, that was a huge deal that made a big impact on labor movement. And a lot of people involved in that union went on to be involved in other struggles, whether it's in labor and the civil rights movement. And one part of that struggle that stood out to me that I wanted to dig into was the fact that there are also Black women that worked on the Pullman cars, the Pullman maids. And the union, which is run by men, didn't really have their back. It kind of cut them out. It didn't really advocate for them or include them the way that it stood up for the men. And it just kind of goes to show that even within these incredibly necessary and progressive labor organizations that have such sweeping and crucial goals, like some people still got left out. And I wanted to, there are a bunch of great books about it. Melinda Chateauver has a great book just specifically about them. But yeah, it just kind of shows one of the big lessons I learned in my book, and hopefully readers will learn, like there's always someone who got left out and they had to figure things out on their own, but a lot of times they did it, you know?
But the Pullman, this labor effort in the beginning, it really was critical for a rising Black middle class, as you stated.
Yeah, that was like because obviously at that time, like there weren't a lot of options for Black men to get good jobs. Like they're stuck doing the dirtiest, lowest paying, most dangerous work. And to work as a Pullman porter, it was still really hard work. There was a lot of discrimination and racism and like the mental strain and anguish of that. But it still at that time was seen as kind of the best gig going. Like if you're a Pullman porter, like you could pass that position down to your son. Like you could build something for your family in a way that hadn't been accessible before. And the union was a big part of making that such a strong option for folks.
Okay, before we wrap, I want to talk about, because I know our audience is going to be interested in this, red baiting. Everyone loves to talk about red baiting. So McCarthyism is obviously a big factor in this, but how did that influence organizing internally?
Oh man, there's so many instances like in the book and just throughout labor history of like these just like incredibly effective and beloved and radical organizers and rank and file worker leaders who just because like they were socialists or anarchists or communists, they're part of the wrong party, had the wrong card in their wallet, they were blacklisted, they were intimidated, they were abused, they're run out of the movement entirely. And it's just like, it's not funny. It's just so absurd because like so many of the most important organizers in labor history in the US have been socialists and anarchists and communists. Like, of course, it's the radicals who are willing to put everything on the line and to push for a better future. Like, you kind of have to have a little bit of that big sky thinking if you're going to try and go from like point A to point Z, like the way that so many of these workers have had to. I think about, I wrote about her more for The Nation. I couldn't squeeze her in as much as I wanted to, but just a organizer named Emma Tenayuka, who was really involved in a pecan shellers strike in Texas. And I think it was the 30s. And she was just an incredibly effective organizer who was blacklisted and like moved out of town because her family was being threatened because she was a communist. And like, it's just such an absurd thing that so few people who don't already have an interest or a stake in learning more about it, like so few people know how important like radicals have been to the history of this country, even like, and like the best stuff, like all the stuff the Democrats like to take credit for, like they could call me for that, honestly.
That's like hashtag. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting though, because like they were even driven out of unions. I mean, this is, I think especially in context of where we are today and in understanding how labor can be disrupted and people can be smeared. I mean, we've seen these efforts with Christian Smalls. Obviously, it was a very big story. How the emails that were sent out about him, but also just elected officials. Like on the electoral side, it is a great way to divide and conquer and ostracize folks. They're still using the same tactics. But I think the conditions are just ripe for more organizing. And you've really laid out a great toolkit, I guess, is read your history, understand your history, essential reading. Oh my God, I want to talk about this more. I hope to have you. Well, you're on all the time, but maybe next time I'll just like find one chapter because there's so much.
Yeah.
I can't.
There's like so much I couldn't fit in there because like thankfully there's so many brilliant historians who have done so much deeper digging into this that like I wanted to squeeze in everything, and there's so much I don't know still that I'm still continuing to research and continue to learn about this stuff. So you can imagine like it just never ends, right? Like the people's history, there's never a stopping point because we're living through it right now.
Exactly. Well, that means you're going to have many books. So
when people buy this one, they'll say.
Go buy it. Wait, I have the mirrored thing here right now, so I can't even fight like hell. There you go. Don't buy it on Amazon or Barnes and Noble. Go buy it from your
Bookshop.
local indie. What bookshelf is that? What you want?
Bookshop.org. It's
Bookshop.
It's a way that you can support independent booksellers and indie bound. Like beg, borrow, steal, order it from your library. I love the library thing. Some people have done that too.
Yeah, but you also have to make money. So.
Yeah, I just want people to read it,
Oh. Spoken like a true progressive. I just want people to read it. I don't want to make
I wrote it for people to read on their break or on the bus. Like, this is our history and we deserve to know about it.
Go check it out. Essential reading, summertime reading if you have a vacation. Good stuff. And it also, the other thing is it's like super informative, but it reads well. Like you're a great storyteller. I should have led with that.
Appreciate that. I tried to make it fun because no one's going to want to sit here and read a 300-page history book if there isn't a little, pizzazz in there.
Well, you're all pizzazz. Kim Kelly, thank you as always for joining us. Go check out Fight Like Hell. Indie booksellers, that's where you got to find them. If you are lucky enough to have an independent bookstore that could sell it, you can also order it from there because we have one in our neighborhood. And when they don't have books, I say, can you order this? And they love when I do that. So you can also do that too. Make sure to demand that they bring it forward and not like 9,000 copies of an RBG like picture book. Every indie bookseller in New York is like, there's like an RBG picture book in it.
And support union booksellers, there's a lot of those out there now.
Exactly.
Booksellers are workers too. We're all in it together.
Indeed. Kim Kelly, thank you so much for joining us. Good luck with the book tour.
Thank you.
All right. See you next time. All right. We will be right back after this quick break to talk about, oh my God, the right wing organizing right now across the country against trans people and this legislation that's been passed and just the attacks all over because we need to understand what's happening. We will be right back after this quick break. We live in crazy times where the tech giants seem to want to own every single part of our lives, literally our data. They want to own how we're able to make money. Do you remember the days when you could post something on YouTube and then it would like fall, it would lead you to another amazing YouTube show. And then I remember I was thinking about this the other day. I was on YouTube and I found all these like amazing actors putting together their own shows and they were so funny. Yeah, that doesn't exist anymore. That is not what YouTube is anymore. So why do I say that? Because we're not in the era where you can just explode and make millions of dollars on YouTube overnight unless you're really boosted or on the right wing. Nope, we are in the era where it's got to be word of mouth and community driven. And that is why Patreon has been so important to us because as the algorithms change, as they play around on all these different platforms owned by the biggest oligarchs and nutty people in the world who have a very conservative agenda, anti-labor agenda, Patreon has really kept us going. And we are so incredibly grateful to our existing patrons, our former patrons. If you are a former patron and you want to come back, let us know. We'll work it out. Go to patreon.com/The Nomiki Show, starting off at $5. That is, by the way, no longer a New York City coffee. I got one right here. I went downstairs today. My New York City iced coffee. It ain't $5 anymore. It was, I'm not kidding you. Are you ready for this? $8.50. $8.50. $8.50. So maybe we should put inflation prices in there. No, really, we're not going to do that. $8.50, and I'm not going to blame it on anything but the rent, because the rent is too damn high in New York. It's nothing else. You got to pay your workers. You got to do well. The coffee is incredible, but it's because of the rent. But if you go to back to us, coffee is what keeps me going here. Patreon.com/the Nomiki Show, all different levels. If you've had to jump around, let us know. We will work with you. Email us at thenomikishow@gmail.com. We've got swag, we've got mugs, we've got bags. Send us your photos of your swag. That would be incredible. All right. Thank you all. We will be right back after this quick break.
You keep on saying that in your bill, you will help kids. So exactly how are you going to help kids?
With
What the help?
With therapy. We want to treat these children, and a lot of them have underlying reasons, underlying problems. In the medical field, if you have an infection and that infection gets so bad, you become septic, where that infection has spread to your bloodstream. And so doctors don't just start throwing antibiotics or medicine at you. They find the root cause of that infection. And so the root cause of a lot of this gender dysphoria is abuse, sexual abuse, depression, anxiety, different things like autism or obsessive compulsive disorders, social contagions. There's all kinds of root causes that we need better therapy to get to the basis of.
I will always agree on therapy because I believe that therapy is needed for everybody. But I do not believe that comparing these kids who believe that they're not in the right body. I do not believe comparing them to an infection. And I do not think that they have a whole bunch of the underlying diseases that you've just said.
I investigated child abuse and neglect for a really long time. I'm a licensed master social worker. This is my background. So I'm telling you that trauma is not indicative of having a different gender identity. That's not interchangeable. That is not something, there's not direct correlation there.
But is that being thoroughly evaluated when they treat them? When
Do they go through psychological evaluations?
They go one time and then they get referred to the gender clinic.
Okay. So are you aware of any therapy that happens prior to that? Do you not think that parents
I've heard stories right here in Missouri where they're not. They go to a counselor with confusion and they're automatically referred to a gender clinic.
Are you in those therapy sessions?
No. And and we're not allowed to know what happens.
Right, because those are confidential.
Right. They're private.
Okay.
Confidential, because those are confidential. Oh boy. All right. That was a clip of, oh my gosh, a Missouri State Representative Pollock, Republican, of course, presenting her anti-trans Save Adolescents from Experimentation bill, saying youth questioning their gender is like an infection that becomes septic, and that autism may be an underlying cause. I'm confused. What's the underlying cause here? All right. This is just one of the many examples of the right wing's total brain. I don't even know what's going on. I don't know if any of these people actually believe it, or they just realize that they need a culture war to win, and to go after folks of any type. And maybe, in some cases it's a 1-2 punch. Go after people's healthcare. Of course, put the trans community in danger. Make the parents more conservative. I don't know. They've got a lot of strategies, of course, taking on education. You're watching it. It's happening all over the country. This is a movement now by the right. Erin Reed tracks anti-trans legislation all over the country and runs the largest trans healthcare map, an informed consent map listing every informed consent hormone therapy clinic for trans people. And you can go check out Erin's TikTok at Erin in the Morn. Erin, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And yeah, that was, like you mentioned, that was Representative Pollock. And at that same hearing, later on, just like a few minutes later, they brought on a witness who was actually a conversion therapist. And they asked her how she would treat the trans kids in Missouri, and conversion therapy was their go-to. Like she had basically stated that.
I can't even at this point. Like
It's pretty ridiculous.
this is insane. Okay, so let's just start off with you. You have this map. When did you start it? How do you go about tracking? Because I imagine, you know, some of these efforts are underway kind of behind the scenes before they go public. So how do you go about this process?
Are you referring to the informed
healthcare
consent
map,
map right here? Yes. And so 3 years ago, whenever I had originally transitioned, I had heard that there was something called informed consent HRT clinics. These are clinics that you can go to that are not gate-kept behind 2 years of therapy, real life experience, basically how they used to do things with transition about 2 years ago. Because not everybody can afford to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on therapy before they're allowed to transition and obtain their hormones. The thing is that these clinics were not in a centralized repository or one place. A lot of times they're just word of mouth. So you go on Reddit, you go on forums that are on the internet, you look for resources that are put out by local organizations that list them, but they weren't put in one place. And so about a year after my transition, I had realized that like I had to do a lot of searching to find my map or to find my location that I go to. And so I figured I would just spend some time and like go through and all of these resources, put them on a Google Maps and just share it publicly. So after sharing it publicly, a lot of people they started giving their own clinics, and it became kind of a community resource rather than just something that I put in there. And it's just become this large list of like 800 clinics. It's been viewed, I think, 2.2 million times.
This is incredible. It really is an incredible amount of research. So, you know, you track the legislation, the right wing, the attacks on the trans community. We hear almost every day, like a new bill comes out, a new hearing, a new tweet. Is there a sense at this point how many bills are in the works? Okay, you do. You have that.
Yeah, so there's a lot of numbers out there because the thing is that these bills are being brought up every day. They're dying every day. And then there are some from the previous year that kind of can still be considered alive right now. Numbers that I hear range between 150 and 250 bills, the most in the history of the United States in terms of anti-LGBT legislation. And you're right, they are popping up every day. I think that like right now you played the one from the Missouri hearing. That one is currently in the stables. Like it may be about to go to the Senate and to the House of Missouri and pass it. There was, you know, a pronoun bill that popped up in Tennessee recently that would have given teachers in Tennessee the right to misgender your students, but only if you're transgender. So like they couldn't misgender or cisgender students, literally just directed at trans students. You know, there are bills that are popping up in Alabama, just passed one recently where so this was crazy. They just had one bill and it was a bill to detransition trans youth, which passed in Alabama. However, they then substituted another bill to become a bathroom ban. So trans people that are in schools as well as teachers can't go to the restroom of their gender identity. And then added to that at the last minute, a don't say gay bill. So, you know, they just kind of like, they're putting everything together.
Everything.
And
then abortion bans too. There's just this list of like everything on top of it. Like
And I'm glad that you mentioned abortion bans, because the thing is that the same organizations that are going after, you know, transgender and LGBT people are the same ones that are going after abortion. And so, you know, you have ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, ADF, the Alliance Defending Freedom. Both of them are pushing these laws.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because that was where I wanted to go, is who are the messaging is like almost, you know, it's not just like, oh, Tucker Carlson says it on TV and then everybody mimics it, or Laura Ingraham or whoever. It really does seem to be like there's lawmakers all over the country who have a set of talking points, may not even understand how to defend them, as we just saw. But it's coming from somewhere. Where ALEC is an incredible tool for the right wing to spread, and the Koch brothers to spread their agenda, and especially using culture wars now. But do you know like is this coming out of the Heritage Foundation? Is there like a specific group that has lobbied very hard to make trans issues the big culture issue of our time? I mean, culture, I'm saying in their terms, not ours. It's a human rights issue in my perspective. do you think that is there like one group that was really behind this that felt like this is where they had to go?
So it's weird. There's a web, and it's a pretty big network of groups that are involved. But the two that you always hear are, like I just mentioned, and ADF, the Alliance Defending Freedom. Alliance Defending Freedom, their hands are in everything. And the thing is that they actually have, it's a very strange sort of cross-pollination with the United Kingdom's wave of trans-exclusionary radical feminism, so TERFism in the United Kingdom. And so they're borrowing some of the things that are coming from there. And they're actually, it's really strange, but they're actually financially donating to groups like the Women's Wolf, the Women's Liberation Front. And these are people who on their face, you know, if you just look at their mission statements and such, you wouldn't imagine that they would be fitting with each other, because, you know, ADF is in favor of banning abortion and has lobbied for SB 8 in Texas, whereas Wolf has been, you know, they're ostensibly a feminist organization. However, you know, they're getting money and they're using the same arguments, and they're actually creating resources together. Like they've branded Understanding Gender Dysphoria in Children, like this guidebook, and it has ADF branding and it's got like Wolf branding, and it's just the strangest thing to see with one another.
Do we have a sense of the funding? Like, are there a group of donors that seem to be pushing this through these different organizations?
The funding is really dark, you know, and
Yeah.
I have not researched too much into the funding. I know that it's hard to get a grasp for who is giving the money to ADF and all these other organizations that are out there. And they don't really report a lot on this stuff.
In terms of polling, I you know, Fox News and the right wing can make issues a thing, and suddenly, you know, like now everyone's talking about pedophilia, which is,
The groomer stuff has been pretty intense.
yeah. So is there a sense, like, I feel like Democrats or progressive, well, Democrats in particular, like center Dems, will pull something before they champion it. I feel like the far right invents something and then makes the polls move. Have you seen, in terms of polling, say 10 years ago, when, I don't even know, when did the first the trans bathroom bills, when did those come up?
2015-ish, that
2015,
year,
not even that long.
give or take a year. Yeah.
Was that the first big issue that was, you know,
It was.
national?
It was. And there was a clear blow up against that issue at the time. You had a lot of organizations that pulled out of North Carolina, which ended up sinking that bill. They pulled back pretty heavily. And actually, there has been some, I don't have the exact like quote or research with me, but there was some organization or some news that came out that showed that this year, the strategy was specifically to get all of these bills passed in several states at once.
Yeah.
So that way, if you did have a backlash, it would be much harder to sustain that backlash to, you know, 15 states. But you did mention polling. And one thing that I will say that was really interesting that came out just yesterday was a civics poll. And what it came out with was that the question was, are issues involving trans Americans important to you? Mm-hmm. And among Democrats, they answered 73% yes. Among Republicans, they answered 35% yes. And so on the left, there is a strong sense of caring for these issues. However, there hasn't been a well-sustained pushback among Democrats for these bills.
Do you think there's do you think that's because they realize they can win on the right and they can go to war with Democrats and basically push them into fighting these issues that they've invented because they have control of the legislature, because it's like, oh, here's how and this is the most ruthless way, as a Republican, you know, strategist might be thinking, well, Republicans are going to do whatever we want them to do no matter what, even if they care about it or don't. But Democrats care about this. So let's go after them on this, have them use their resources. And in the meantime, we can chip away at the rights of you know, trans people, women who are seeking abortions. And in the case of CRT, you know, you've got people of color and teachers. So let's just go for them all at once.
Totally. Absolutely. And that's 100% part of it. But I don't think that it's the whole story, because in states where they have a massive majority, so we're talking like my state of Maryland or Hawaii, there are these bills that would offer equal healthcare protections, for instance, to transgender people. And in Maryland, the bill got spiked at the last moment in Hawaii, which is literally 24 Democrat, 1 Republican. There is currently a healthcare bill that, if passed, would make life so much better and so much easier for the trans people in Hawaii. And that bill is currently sitting in conference committee. It's been delayed twice. Right now, at this moment, I think they're probably going to be discussing it. And I mean, I don't want to see that bill get spiked either. So, I mean, yes, I think that that's part of it. But I think even in places where we ostensibly have a lot of allies, we still need help. We still need those bills to pass. We still need people to act at home.
And I wonder, is this because maybe there's Democrats who think that there are more culturally conservative Democrats that they need to win still?
Very possibly, but like 24-1, like you can pass that and still get rid of like half of your Democrats, and still, whereas in the meanwhile, you know, we see a poll like the Civics poll that shows 72% of Democrats find transgender issues to be important to them. Like even in places where they're not going to risk anything, like there's no risk, we can't get the bills passed. And so I think that there is an issue of, having spoken to some of the people doing the work on the ground, a lot of Democrats are simply uncomfortable. A lot of legislators are simply uncomfortable with trans topics. Like I've spoken to them, and like they've talked about how going to these legislators, speaking to them, you know, they've got to work through a lot of really basic questions and a lot of uncomfortable moments, and they still get the response of, you know, the kind of response that you'd expect sometimes from Republicans, where they're just like, I just don't know how I feel about this, that kind of stuff.
A lot of education still have. So
a lot of education to be done. Seriously.
A lot. And I learned something. I've seen some stories on TikTok, especially just how difficult a day in the life of someone who's trans is, because of a lot of the legislation, because of a lot of ridiculous rules. Let's play this clip of the airport.
Sure.
I know you're like, oh yeah, I know. I'm like, what? Let's play this clip.
If you're cisgender, did you know that most transgender people have to arrive to the airport 15 minutes earlier than you in order to get there at the same time? This is just one of many time taxes that apply to being trans. If you don't understand, I'll explain. Airport body scanners are built under the assumption that your anatomy matches your gender presentation. So when it doesn't, it's going to think that you're smuggling a bomb. Watch this.
The TSA officer will press a button designating a gender based on how you present yourself, male or female.
So this is clearly pretty ridiculous, but this is what a lot of transgender people have to go through when they go to the airport. And in fact, if you read the TSA guidance for transgender people, it literally says to get there early. So recently, the federal government said that they would change these machines. However, Lauren Boebert just filed a bill to block those changes. It really sucks to know that there's an entire political party dedicated to making life harder for trans people.
So this is like the time tax is incredible. Erin, what other examples do you have of how your life is just like more inconvenient and difficult? Because obviously there's legislation like Lauren Boebert wanting to block any sort of basic switch. I mean, like that's not difficult for TSA to do. They don't care. But Lauren Boebert's like, no, I'm going to punish you.
Yeah. And, you know, it's not a huge deal to change these machines and the algorithms. I actually have spoken to some of the programmers. One of the programmers that's involved is transgender herself. And so that's, you know, it's not a huge deal, but they're still trying to block it. And there's no policy objective that serves. It literally is just designed to make life harder. But there are like a lot of other things that people might take for granted that end up taking a whole lot longer, just because, you know, my gender identity doesn't match what I was assigned at birth. So my birth certificate is a huge deal. Like my birth certificate having my dead name on it and having my old gender on it. Anytime that like I need to prove that I am my son's parent and I have my driver's license as my current name, but you know, like I have to show on his birth certificate and it's got my old name on it, I have to then like bring out my name change documents, bring out like a whole lot of other things. Same with like my passports. You know, I'm trying to get my passport right now. And in order to do that, you have to send in your birth certificate, which is pretty trivial for a lot of people, but because my birth certificate doesn't match my current name, I've got to also send in a lot of other stuff, and I got to gather them from different places, which also then costs money. And a lot of times, you know, it'd be a lot easier if I could just send in my birth certificate. Like that'd be so much easier. But because I'm from Louisiana, the policies around changing your birth certificate are very difficult. And so in order for me to change my name and my birth certificate, being from Louisiana, I have to fly out to Louisiana. I have to appear in front of a judge in my home county, which my home county is like an 87% Trump county, and judges are elected. And so it's going to be a rough like deal, and I'm going to do it. Like I'm planning on it, and I'm working on making those reservations. COVID kind of slowed things down for me on that front. But yeah, like there's all kinds of things that, you know, you just kind of run into.
And in terms of voting, are there any issues? I mean, we know how Republicans love to go after any sort of person that does not fit their white supremacist like dreamscape in terms of voting, but specifically, you know, marginalized communities and people of color. Given that, I mean, there are voter ID laws that exist in many parts of the country now. Does that affect your ability to vote?
I mean, because, you know, like I know that a lot of times trans people might be stuck filing like a provisional ballot or something because of the fact that their driver's license doesn't match their birth certificate, which doesn't match what they have on file at the voting place. And if you move from one state to another state and you still have your old state driver's license, like there's all kinds of issues. I know that, for instance, college students can vote where they go to college at, but college students, like somebody in a red state that comes from Maryland, where you can change your gender and your driver's license by attestation, might then go to like Nebraska or something where they have different laws around that. And so if they try to go and vote and they present their voter ID, the voter ID doesn't match, you know, the records, then, you know, things can get really messy.
And we take all this stuff so much for granted. And this is why I think your work is so powerful, and that you're informing people and really pulling back the curtain so folks understand just how many of these laws are across the country. Also providing information for the trans community in that you have this incredible map that you've been working on for a few years now, but also just like your TikTok. It's really like, this is how you take action. This is what's happening. Did you know this? It's really incredibly informative, and I would love to have you back on to talk more. I know that this issue, Republicans are just going to keep going. So
it's not going to end.
There's more to fight on. Before we wrap, who is there, like, I know it's happening all over the country, but is there like one state or maybe like one representative that we should really keep our eye on?
Right now, I think that the big, oh God, there are a few, like even narrowing it down to one. Okay, so for instance, right now, Texas, Greg Abbott and Paxton, child abuse. They're trying to enforce being trans as child abuse, but also in Florida with the governor of Florida just releasing a guidance that says that youth should be banned from social transition, and that's the next big scary one that I see. This goes beyond just like hormone therapy or anything. This is like literally telling kids that they can't present as anything other than their gender at birth.
And what does that even mean? Like
haircuts, like that's all it is. Haircuts and clothes and pronouns, like for most.
And how do you associate? Like the guy in a kilt? Like, does that count? No, I don't know.
Right,
Who
exactly.
decides?
Right, it's dumb.
Are you gonna go after Harry Styles? Like, what? I don't know.
Right.
All right, Erin Reed. It's absurd, but it's dangerous. That's why the Republicans are so scary. It seems so ridiculous, except they're actually accomplishing these things.
Yep.
Dystopian times that we live in. Erin, thank you so much for joining us. Really, really fascinating conversation.
Anytime.
Go check out Erin in the Morn, Twitter and TikTok. And of course, we've got the links for the map up there and the resources that you've provided. Really appreciate you joining us for Femme Friday and hope to have you back again soon.
Totally. Thank you for having me.
So if you follow me, you'll notice that I say contact your legislators all of the time. But a lot of people don't quite know what I mean by that. I'm not telling you to call up your governor right now and to say, hey, what's with this anti-trans bill? No. I'm going to make it a whole lot easier for you to contact your legislator and make a difference on these laws. Okay, so you're going to want to go to myreps.datamade.us. This is one of many sites where you can put in your address and find out who your representatives are. But what I like about this site is that not only does it give you your representatives, it gives you their phone number, and it gives you their social media accounts. Keep that in mind. Okay, so I'm going to put in 101 Main Street, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And then you click search. And I'm going to want you to scroll down. Imagine that you live in 101 Main Street, Philadelphia. You see all of these people, state treasurers, auditor generals, Supreme Court justices. Ignore all that. Those people are useless. What you want to go down to is these people right here, Anthony H. Williams and Joanna Clinton. You see state senator and state representative. Keep those people in mind. What I like about this site is that you can actually click on their Facebook or click on their Twitter URLs. Believe it or not, these people pay a lot more attention to social media these days than they do to their own phones. But if you want, you can also click on contact and give them a call. Here's why this is so important. Representatives, like local representatives, state representatives, they only represent a few thousand, maybe a few tens of thousands of people at most. These are people that probably know people that you know in your community. And so whenever you call them or whenever you tag them on social media, they've got no following. They will easily respond back to you. Or whenever you call them, often you'll actually get them on the phone themselves. So anytime you see me put forth like a call to action to call your representative or contact your representative, do this. You're going to be much more likely to get in touch with somebody that actually matters.
All right, we got some shout outs, really great shout outs here. Jade B, thanks for becoming a patron, and Penelope A, I love the name Penelope so much. It's like one of my favorites. Britt S, thank you so much for doubling your pledge over on Patreon, excuse me. Britt S says, just want to say thank you so much for your work and everything that your show does. I look forward to hearing Nomiki every week. I lived in New York City while she was campaigning for public advocate and got to canvas for her. Just a true inspiration. I wanted to say how much your voice and insight mean. You guys mean so much. Thank you for your voice, all of your work and everything. Oh my God, thank you. That was so kind. My goodness, every once in a while, you can get notes like this, and it just, you have tough days, and you hear so much negativity on the internet, and so much of it's just bullshit. So thank you, everybody. And then on Twitch, I want to give a shout out to Old Man House Phone. I love that. Thank you for your bits. And Matt Bender rated. Thanks, Matt. Nug Wrangler, thank you for resubscribing. And Last Sue, thank you so much for your bits. Everybody's so grateful. I also want to give 2 more shout outs. Gabrielle, who was my incredible server recently. Gabrielle made my day, also a listener. And then when I was in San Francisco last week, geez, I couldn't have a better week. Love running into incredible people, but Mo made our I had a very tumultuous trip to San Francisco. I ended up in the hospital. I was very sick. But I recovered very quickly. But Mo made my Friday last Friday. Was it Friday? Last Thursday. Thank you to Mo for being incredible server and joy. And we were having a wine tasting, and Mo has been watching and listening to our work since I think 2015, and learned a lot about the Democratic Party. And I love these kinds of stories. It happens every once in a while, and I figured I would do some shout outs on the show now when it happens. So thank you to everybody for tuning in today for this Femme Friday. We will see you. Check us out next week still. Same time, same place, but we're taking a quick break, and then we'll be back in another week with brand new guests. And then that's just join us on all the places. I don't even know how to rap. I have vacation brain right now. Make sure to check us out on YouTube and Twitch and Twitter and Facebook, and of course Patreon and all the podcast platforms. In the meantime, stay in solidarity.
The Nomiki Show. Clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, faith fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show.